Welcome to Peopleverse. I'm your host, Evan Troxel, and I'm an architect. Peopleverse is a show where I talk with people throughout the building industry to unearth authentic stories from interesting people to entertain and inspire. You might have heard of the metaverse. Well, we're doing something different here. In many ways, the building industry is still very much like the Wild West, even in a time when technology and data are abundant. Peopleverse explores the people and the stories behind the projects to remind us why we got into this industry in the first place and to build relationships along the way. This show is brought to you by Techt, and you can learn more about what we're doing to connect the supply and demand sides of the building industry at techt.com. And you can learn more about Peopleverse at peopleverse.fm. I'm excited because today I have two guests on the show. I'm going to read you the bio for the first one here, who is Michele Grace Hottel, AIA. Michele has been practicing architecture with her own firm, Michele Grace Hottel Architect, since 1994, after working as a consultant with other architecture and engineering firms in the Los Angeles and San Diego area. She, like me, attended Cal Poly Pomona and the University of Copenhagen, which is way beyond what I did, for architecture. Michele is on the AIA CRAN National Advisory Group, and CRAN is the Custom Residential Architects Network, and the chair of her local CRAN chapter. She's also a commissioner and subject matter expert for the California Architects Board and a past City of La Mesa planning commissioner. And she is a fellow podcaster as well, and I'll put a link to her podcast in the show notes, which is called I've Never Met a Woman Architect Before. And I've even had the pleasure of being on that show. So, Michele, welcome to the Peopleverse.
Thank you, Evan. Thanks for having me on here.
You're welcome. I'm also going to read Djana Venolia's bio here, who is our second guest. Djana is a licensed architect and urban designer in Brazil who also has a certificate in interior design from the New School of Architecture in San Diego. She has worked with architectural services, interior and landscape design, and media services for residential, commercial, and hospitality projects in Africa, Europe, the US, and Brazil for over 20 years. After moving to the US, Djana has engaged in various projects supporting her community. She volunteers at her church, local YMCA, and she has collaborated with other nonprofits teaching art, architecture, and robotics, to name a few. Djana joined the Western Lighting and Energy Controls family in 2019 and has dove into the LED world through the lens of a designer as well as the sustainability aspects of energy savings. So, welcome to the Peopleverse, both of you. I'm so happy that you've joined us.
Thank you so much, Evans and Michele.
So I'm incredibly excited about this because you two have a symbiotic relationship in the world of architecture from what we at the Peopleverse call the supply and the demand side of, our profession. You have this symbiotic relationship. I think one of the things that you and I were talking about, Michele, was there's only so much an architect could possibly know about all of the different parts that go into a building. And Djana is at let's just call it kind of an elevated sales rep. I mean, you sound like the perfect kind of sales rep because you are an architect in Brazil and you understand what architects actually need. And so this is the perfect opportunity to show off what that looks like, because I think this is the kind of relationship that we're striving to create and that people want to have in the profession.
Yeah, when I was having my first interview at Weston, I told the owners, I know nothing about lighting. And he said, that's okay, because all the business background and the design background you have, and that's harder to teach. I can teach you about lighting, and specifically LED lighting, right? And I said, okay, that's fine. So yeah, that helps a lot to have the brain of my customers,
And Michele, I mean, you are the one who connected us together here for this conversation today. And just give people an idea of the kind of like workload that you have as an architect? I know that your small firm is doing a ton of work and you have to balance all of that. And so there's huge benefits to kind of outsourcing when you can to an expert like Djana when you need her.
Definitely. I mean, I'm a sole proprietor, so I have for some of the projects, I do have outside help to do the drafting, but for most of them, I'm actually doing that also. So it's like I've got, I wear many hats, and and one less thing that I'd have to do is when I can, you know, use a product rep for all of their vast amount of information, because there's so much that we need, especially with things. I mean, it's different if you're talking about lumber, but if you're talking about lighting, where the technical aspects are moving so fast and the codes are changing so quickly, that you really have to have somebody to be on top of it, and that isn't always the architect. That's why we need to use these consultants.
Yeah, that's a great point because speaking about it as an architect in California, where the energy code it's seeming like every jurisdiction is different. First of all, the requirements are different. Some require, you have to do a full analysis. You have to submit that with the plans. It seems to me like those are the kinds of things that and how many projects do you have? You have like 24 projects going on at the same time, right? I mean, that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, you pointed out I had 25 the other day and I'm constantly doing proposals. But and there are, it's mostly residential. So there are so many things, and Title 24 is just changing. I mean, how many times has it changed over the last 5 years? 3 times, I think. With the code changing all the time, there's so much that we have to know just about, the even the lighting aspect, of it is just, even in small residential projects. I mean, we have, 2 full pages of notes about all of the aspects of lighting, because that's a big thing in our Title 24 energy calculations.
So, Djana, when an architect, maybe it's Michele, maybe it's other architects that you're helping, are coming to you, it seems like one of the most important aspects of your job is sharing those updates that relate to your products with them real time, like right then. Because architecture projects, we all know, they take a long time, and you probably don't even know when they're coming to you what phase of the project they're in. So it seems like there's some things that you juggle, kind of taking in the context of where the designers come from, but that is a huge asset that you can be for them to share that kind of information, because they can't keep it top of mind all the time.
Yeah, that's right. And it is different if you're talking about residential projects. It kind of like happens a little faster than the commercial. And yeah, commercial projects sometimes it's like 5 years down the road, and the code change, and then you needed to redo a lot of parts and pieces. But the residential side, there is also another code that people don't talk a lot, that's called JA8, and it is part of a Title 24, and it is just like another level of energy savings for residential projects. And a lot of like we don't know what that is. It's like, so cutting the time for research, I think it is huge, because like you were saying, even so, like there's so many parts and pieces for architects to put together, and then you're like spending hours and hours trying to research the right solution for each application, right? And then I can do that a little faster. And it's like, I don't do lighting design. That's something that I wanted to make it clear here. I assist with the specification. So when Michele tells me, Djana, I want to downlight. So what downlight am I going to use here? So I give her, options, so she can choose, like sometimes lead time, sometimes it is the budget, finishes, whatever it is, and then she narrows down to decide what she's going to use in her projects.
Because of the different lines of products, you have to have the infrastructure for some of the projects in order to use some of the other products. And so that's where Djana is very helpful in knowing those, because I did not know that there were several different, like Lutron has many different lines of their products. And so there's the line that you could buy at a big box store, or there's the line that you get from the rep. And anytime that you want to try to combine, you can't combine those different products. So Djana, was very helpful with saying like, yeah, when she came to look at one of my projects, it had already been wired. And she said, yeah, we can't use any of my product in this because it's wired with a different Lutron line.
That's interesting. I think what that leads me into wanting to talk about is collaboration early in the project versus coming in, like you're saying here, where the electrical was already installed, and then everybody has to kind of shift where they were going because of a decision that's already been made, which could lead to substitutions and potentially change orders, or a client not getting what they were expecting to get. So maybe you two can both kind of riff on the idea of how important it has been to your relationship and to your projects, Michele, to collaborate early in the process.
I think it's always good. I've been bringing in, window companies early on in the project. And so then, after I found out about the difference in these different lines, I said, okay, I'm going to start bringing in also a lighting consultant early on, or the lighting rep, even early on in the process, where before I wouldn't have contacted anybody that early, because it would be more like, oh, it's decorative, but it's not just decorative. It's very integral to all of the infrastructure of the house.
The Lutron part, it is actually the brain and what controls the lighting. And it also doesn't control just the lights, can do the shades as well, and thermostat. So when you were talking about nowadays smart homes, everybody wants a little bit of that, if not the full package, right? So there's a lot in the background that it needs to be thought ahead of a time. So when the installation is going, the contractor knows what they're doing. And there's also the collaboration with the electrical engineer, because they're the ones that are going to say what panel size or what is going, that is going to do the whole capacity of, the lighting. So we work really closely with the electrical engineers as well.
Well, for residential projects, I'm basically doing the lighting for these, but and then as far as, but we typically don't have an electrical engineer for a residential project, so that's why we need to be closer in contact with with Djana and other people in the product rep field, because we typically don't have another engineer come in to work on that.
I'm interested to hear about how this relationship that you two have, especially in regards to early collaboration, plays out with the owner, right? And so thinking about it from the perspective of a residential architectural project owner, it seems to me like there would be value for them to not only see this relationship, but also to participate in this kind of knowledge sharing that happens early on the project, because then it's setting a realistic expectation of what they're actually going to get in the end.
Yeah. And I think a lot of homeowners, they see a lot of these things about smart homes and the smart technology, and how, I want to be able to control everything from my phone. And then this definitely becomes more, pieces of the puzzle.
What you mentioned brought me to memory that another project that I'm working with interior designer, and I am, provide them the samples so they can go and put all together, so they have a cohesive, theme or the aesthetic that. So those part also goes in the details. So those are the keypads that goes on the wall. So what is going to match with your wall color or wallpaper, whatever you have in there, right?
Yeah, and I think one thing that architects, I'm coming at this from an architect, and you guys can probably both, I don't know if it actually works like this for you, but I know for a long time, architects didn't want to bring other people in, especially in front of a client, because they might say something that they don't want them to say. Obviously, they want to, they're kind of control freaks, right? We're all control freaks at some level, and we want to control the conversation about what the client's exposed to and the kind of decisions they have to make and the timing of all of that. But I think the times have changed when it comes to that kind of thing, right? The way that we're talking about involving clients in the entire design process, much more so than they have been traditionally, where an architect would work on something behind closed doors for a long time and then present just a final product. I think people who are owners who are paying for this kind of thing expect a lot more out of the process, to be involved throughout it in a lot more of the decision making. And so I'm just wondering, from your perspective, Michele, as the architect, as you get to be the de facto control freak in this conversation. How has that been? And maybe you've always operated that way and really been inclusive in the design process, but obviously a lot of architects aren't like that. So maybe you can just speak to kind of this, opening up the collaboration to a lot more parties earlier on, like you're talking about. How has that been for you as an architect, and to kind of thinking about who's listening to this right now, how other architects, what they could take away from that, from your experience in that way?
I mean, I'm probably a control freak in some ways, but not about the design. Maybe about the design, but it's also we work for our clients. I mean, that's kind of ultimately, we work for our clients, and they come to us because they have a need and they cannot do it themselves, and so they need help, right? They need help creating this home that they want to live in. And then they also come, so many people, it's the smart home, they have different ideas about it. And because I don't know all of those things about everything about the smart home, and a lot of people, they've already done research, right? Because of the internet, they've done a lot of research on this, and they like a certain product, or maybe they want a certain feature of something, and I can't possibly know all of those things. I mean, it's because I am wearing so many hats, and so that's why it's really good. And I think a lot of times we might even get a better product than we thought that we were going to get, because the homeowner is talking to the product rep and they're showing them all of these, different choices for things. And then I can kind of help them narrow down also, with the product rep, because a lot of times there's so much information out there. We can kind of help them narrow it down into making those selections and choices.
Djana, when an architect comes to you, I would assume that they kind of have some baseline assumptions. They could be correct, they could be incorrect, but I think you, understanding where they're coming from, you probably are able to ask questions to get a handle of where they're coming from really quickly. Could you give maybe some examples of how those initial interactions with architects go to help you serve them better than finding information on a website?
I believe that understanding the design intent, that's like the key. So if you capture what it is in the architect's and the designer's mind, and then from that you can provide the solutions, the options to achieve the goal that they have in their mind. So online card, I rep like 80 different manufacturers. So some of those interlace with each other.
Okay.
And so how you get that list and start checking the boxes, right? That will filter down and give you the answer that they need. But for me, provided the education, the tools for the architects to actually have the conversation with their clients or the parts of the design, the team, that's big. You don't know what you don't know. So it's like you give it the information, you feed them, give it the language, the understanding, And I think that helps a lot through the whole process. And somebody will show some, an option like a lighting fixture that has inferior quality. We have a DCU that I love. It is LED, how good is good enough, because not all LEDs are made the same. Even that if you have the same technical aspects, they're not the same. And it's like, why this costs 3 times more than this if it says like it is 3000 CCT, and then there's little details in that in between. So if you don't know what it is good and what it is not good, what is not acceptable, you're just on the mercy of, the contractor putting those big box stores that whatever they sell there. And that's all. Okay. One thing that I've learned is that good lighting, you might not really see, but bad lighting, you notice right away. I'm like, this is awful. Like, I can't stand, and it gives like health issues like migraines, right? And down in productivity, and people are working more from home. So there's a lot of upgrades in the home office, and all this is like, it is very interesting. The times that we're living right now after the pandemic, right?
Yeah. You mentioned this whole idea of something that architects maybe don't know about as far as quality or the kind of the health benefits of art. What are the kinds of questions that architects should be asking about your product category? If we could give some tips right now to architects who are thinking about, based on this conversation, even working with somebody on the lighting side of products, what are the questions that they should be asking?
That's a good one. I am really big on the human-centric lighting and the health aspect. When I first learned about the well-building standard, it was fascinating for me because we're pretty familiar with LEED certification, and that's the core and shell for the building, right? That's not really the users. And we spend, I think, 94% of the time indoors. And then think about it's like you need the lighting, right? And then if you have not like I'm going to say bad lighting and long, the time that's going to build up, going down on your productivity, and even the opposite at night, you won't be able to reset and rest because of the blue light. You spend so many hours in front of the computer. So um, I believe that the questions, answer your question is like, what questions the architects needed to be asking. It is like how that lighting solution, it actually moves along the daylight, because the idea it is to bring daylight indoors, so you
Hmm.
feel that transition and not mess up with your circadian rhythm, right? And then at night
Yeah,
that
yeah,
comes down, you have a more warm lights, and then you're giving to your brain the message is like, okay, now you need to start relaxing to be able to perform and go to bed and have really a health life. I think that's really the
yeah.
key.
I want to ask you both a question. It's the same question, but I want you to each answer it from your point of view. And that is like, Michele, I think it goes beyond just your relationship with Djana here. It goes, think about all of the product reps that you interact with on projects, which is going to be a lot, right? Every project has hundreds of building products in it. And I know you don't interact with hundreds of reps on every single project. Obviously, we reuse a lot of the stuff over and over again because we've already spent the time to do it and we trust it and it worked well and all of those things. But think about this from that perspective. And Djana, think about this the same way. You work with a lot of architects. And so the question is what do most people get wrong about what you do? So, Djana, what do most architects get wrong about the category that you're repping here, which is lighting? And Michele, what do most product reps get wrong about working with architects? So, Michele, if you could take that first.
I think think that people think that we don't want to listen, or we don't want to learn anything new, and really we're totally open to learning things that are new. And I mean, if somebody in the product rep, if they have something that is going to make make my life easier, right? It's like I totally invite them to collaborate with me. And and it's all about the collaboration. It's like, if you can work with somebody and things go really well, then you can move on to the next project, or with a team that you already have, and the information and the team, it's going to make it go a lot easier for everybody, moving forward in the next project. And the more that you can have a good relationship with the person, if you get along with them, like Djana and I get along, very well. So it's easy, it's easy to work with her. It just makes it so much easier.
All right, my turn, huh? Okay. The lighting business model, it is very unique because, like, I work at Western, it is a broker, and other industries, they don't have that. So I actually don't sell anything to Michele's customer. For example, there's a whole chain that goes through that, this process. And so that's one that people get really wrong, is that they think that I sell, lighting. So I don't. And we don't put any, when I give a budget price, that's just an idea how much their clients should be paying for that product. But who dictates that? It is really the contractor that is going to place the order through a distributor, and then they're going to charge the client back, right? So when we are putting together a lighting schedule and looking at the budget, I give the idea for the architect how much that product will cost, right? And so it is very interesting, to say, like, look, I got paid by the manufacturers. What I get paid has nothing to do how much your client is paying to the contractor.
Right. We don't have anything to gain by finding a good product for our clients, right? I mean, like Djana is not going to make more money because she recommends this product. I mean, it's not all about like, okay, we're going to see how much money we can gouge the client or something. I mean, it's not that at all. If it's not about the money, and you're just truly trying to give them a better end product by right, like if we want to talk about insulation in a building, it's like we have certain insulation that we have to have for code, then but really it comes down to, is this building going to perform better for you? Are you going to be able to be in the space without using a lot of energy? Are you going to be comfortable in that space? It's like, so we don't sit there and say, oh, I want to give you better insulation so that because I can charge more money for this insulation and I'll get paid for that. No, it's because the product and how the person is going to feel in that space is going to be better.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about the cost stuff that you're bringing up in both of these different kind of scenarios, because I think one thing that architects value out of a relationship with, or an interaction with, any sales rep is ballpark costs. So maybe Michele, if you could just talk about kind of representing all architects and kind of a call to action for sales reps to understand. I think Djana already totally gets this, which is, how valuable is it to you to be able to get ballpark cost information during the design process as early as possible so that you can make decisions? It's a little bit of a leading question, I know, but I want to underline this as a point that's really valuable.
Yeah, and I mean, what I like to do is, the more that we have at the beginning is usually better for the budget of the project. It's like, I like to get preliminary estimates after schematic design, so if we can already bring in somebody about how, if lighting is going to be important, if all of the controls, if a smart home, if all of that is going to be important for them at the beginning, then we can bring in the consultants and start to talk. And then when we're getting the preliminary estimates from the contractors, we'll have a better idea of what of whether or not, we can, the client can afford that project. I mean, that's why I like to get preliminary estimates, because why go forward with a project that they really, can't afford? We can adjust the budget we can adjust things at the beginning in order to get the, the programmatic elements of their project.
And Djana, I know that you already totally get this. You brought it up yourself. You provide that information. Does that come from your background as an architect, or is that just something? I mean, because there are a lot of reps out there who are really not okay with putting numbers out there. They don't want people to know what the unit costs are. Architects want installed costs, ballpark. You could be off by 40% and it would still be okay, right? Because at least we have some idea. I'm just wondering your thoughts on the subject of providing that information early in the project.
Yeah, for sure. My background, it helps that. It's not every rep that will help that way. But I mean, I understand like what they need, and it's like, why I wouldn't jump ahead and it's like, look, you need this, and every time that I'm presenting our company, bringing in a manufacturer, and it's like, ask me for budget price. I really give me like anxiety when people don't ask me any price. And I was like, how are you selecting all this without knowing how much it is going to cost? And then later on, that it will create a problem because it is over budget and then it needed to be value engineered. And I can't stand that because it gives like that openness is like for bad product installed in the project because that was not, thought ahead of a time. That makes sense. Leaving like for the last minute to change to accommodate the budget, that's not the ideal scenario. I don't like that. So I prefer to give the price ahead of a time, and then they will say like, this sounds like 250. I don't want this. Can we find something that is 150? Absolutely. But it's still under the control of the designer.
And not only that, but you're the person who's probably closest to that. You're talking with the most contractors about that kind of thing. And so you can actually provide the most accurate ballpark information, if that's a
Yes,
thing.
it is.
Right. But that seems really, really valuable to any design professional to have that information up front. So as a call to action out there for all of those reps who are who hesitate in providing that information, it's so valuable to architects to be able to get that. And again, you don't have to be right on the money, but you need to be in the ballpark. And that really helps a design professional decide if this is even a direction that we can go, right? And I think a lot of times having a sales rep at the table early really helps us make those kinds of decisions. Is this even a direction that we can go? If not, we got to cut bait and run, right? Like that's how it works. We got to do something else. And the earlier we know that, the better, right? Michele, I'm sure you have thoughts on that whole thing because you're doing so many projects at the same time.
Can I just put up one of the for HVAC companies are kind of notorious. They will not give you an idea of what a ductless unit will cost. I mean, it's always like, oh no, we can't tell you. You have to come in here with an HVAC contractor, and then we can give him the price. And I said, you know what? I just want to know what the difference would be between the different units. It's like I'm not. I'm just trying to get a ballpark. And a lot of them, they want, if you go into an HVAC, distributor, they will not give you a price for any of that. If I don't have, even as an architect, I mean, you have to go through an HVAC contractor in order to get that. But when you're trying to say, okay, what solution is better, right? Because you've already got the information from the Title 24 consultant of what you need, but which product would be better, or which, what are these, what is the cost of that product, and then it kind of will give us a better idea of what of what the client can afford. And especially, in residential, it's like you've got a fixed budget. It's not like people are going to turn around and say, oh yeah, by the way, now we're going to have like, $500,000 more for this project instead of, $500,000.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can start wrapping up now, but I'm really interested in how your relationship began. Like, how did you guys find each other?
Had we not been connected on social media through AIA, then, and me posting about my kid going to this conference, and then Djana saying, oh, my kid's going to that conference too. And then she reached out and we were like, oh, okay. And we're both outgoing people. So I'm sure that we would have met each other somewhere, but yeah.
Eventually.
It's interesting that you guys met on social media. I think, Djana, as far as repping products and things go, how interested are you in finding architects through social media? Is that a really major way for you to find and connect with design professionals nowadays?
Yeah, and I've been using internet for a long time. When I was in Brazil, back in the day, I used Skype to communicate with my customers, right? Like, I've never been to Africa, Angola, and I have several projects there. So I've always been connected like that in a global sense. And I have an architect now that therefore start liking my posts on my Instagram. And then I messaged today, I was like, I love it that you actually interacting with me. I don't know you. Can I go there and introduce myself and so on? And I think that's the organic power of, the social media, is that people, they're interested in the same things that you're talking.
And so beyond kind of this professional connection that you two made and have fostered through, I'm sure, several projects now, are there additional benefits that have come out of this relationship that you guys have established and put time into?
We're friends.
Yeah, we're definitely friends. I mean, we do stuff during off hours. I mean, it's like we do go to do, interesting things on the off hour. Yeah. I think also too, I mean, it's good because, we do also talk, right? I mean, some people have golf, right? We have, wine tasting, and I can't line dance, but Djana can maybe line dance. But yeah. And I mean, we do talk about work in the off hours, and so I've learned more about lighting from being around Djana and then other lighting designers. And I have gone to continuing ed. I think I went to a continuing ed of yours early on in the project, so that, kind of learning about all the different spectrums of the colors of light, and the energy that it takes to run them, and how that affects different things. So I've definitely learned a lot about lighting from hanging out with Djana. So, I'm learning. It's always good to learn from your friends.
Yeah, and the reason I brought up, like, is there anything beyond this kind of professional relationship? And I guess it feeds back into the professional relationship through the other activities that you guys have chosen to do together. Is the best scenario possible is for you two and your network to have trust between each other, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, that's really where this leads, right? Is to more trust throughout this lifespan of this relationship, so that when Michele has any question about lighting, you're going to be the first person that she calls, Djana, right? And even if you don't know the answer, you probably know somebody who does, and you're going to get her that as fast as possible. Yeah. And so by building this network, I mean, that's what we call the Peopleverse. I mean, this is the Peopleverse podcast. It's all about building these trusted relationship networks between real people, because there's so much wisdom, there's so much experience kind of locked up in people that will never be found on a website. right? It'll never be found in a PDF or a cut sheet for some light that I need for my project. And so this trust that you have built through this relationship that started on social media connected by the AIA is absolutely kind of the model of what we're talking about here. And this is the kind of thing that architects and sales reps both benefit from. So I really appreciate you both taking the time today to talk about this and to show this example to everybody else of what I think we're all kind of striving for. And on the architect side, I think a lot of architects go it alone. They are hesitant to reach out. They're hesitant to invest the time because there's lots of bad experiences. There's lots of baggage out there. Maybe they've been burned before, or one of their architect friends had a bad experience and they shared it with them. And then they feel like they need to go it alone. And I think what we're saying here with the three of us is life is better when we can trust each other. Life is better when we make these connections and build these networks, and people are helpful because they want to be helpful, which ultimately leads to selling more products over time, right? Because buildings are made of products. So thank you both so much for spending the time today to kind of show this, that it works. It's a fantastic example.
Thank you so much. Even then, as a designer, I would never want any of my customers to think that I'm offering something because I want to sell, but because I truly believe that's the right solution for their problem, right? For their application. So I won't do that to anybody.
We're here to help.
Thank you so much. And thanks for joining me on the Peopleverse podcast today. And until next time, see you guys later.
Bye. Thank you.
Hey, before you go, can you do one thing for me? Hit the like button. It really does help us in the YouTube universe. Watching all the way to the end is probably even more helpful, so thank you for that too. It all adds up and helps more people find the show. These are great ways for you to help spread the word and contribute to the Peopleverse. If you want to help the channel even more, please subscribe and use that red button right down there and turn on the notification bell so that you'll know exactly when the next episode comes out. It's completely free to do so. And finally, do you have something to add to this conversation? If you do, leave a comment. I read all of them. I can't wait to share the next conversation with you. So until then, see you soon.